think we really like that.
Okay. Call this meeting to order. The first thing is the approval of the minutes. Did everybody have a chance to read them?
Yes. I have read the minutes and I move we approve them as written.
Second.
Everybody in favor? Aye. All approved. So the next thing, public comment. There's no public here. There's no public online. So Paul, you're up.
This time I don't really have anything particularly new. Just some bunch of stuff today with Marissa, so she's going to talk about information.
Okay, that's fine. If you don't have anything to go over, you don't have anything to go over. So the board chair report, I actually did one today. It was a little bit late getting out. So later on in the action items, we're going to talk about the lab duties and powers, but I just, in my board report, I made a comment that Linda and I separately working on them came up with ones that were amazingly similar. And what I would like to see is people come up with their own ideas for this that I know in the January meeting, Jennifer mentioned some different ways of looking at them. And I would like to get as many different ways of looking at these as possible so that we can go over them in the February meeting. And just a reminder that we can meet to discuss them as long as we don't have a quorum. Library has great meeting rooms we can reserve online. Many of us are not gainfully employed during the day, so we can be around. I'm home now for the next several months. I spent all my travel money. So that's the most important thing that I wanted to talk about.
I just want to add that the short version is mine.
Then always the long version was mine, Linda. I'm sure everybody here that knows this knows that the long version was mine. Does anybody else have any board reports?
I just want to have a verbal, I attended the March 11th meeting that was here. Was it last week? Yeah, last week. And I think I saw you, we were three different chairs.
I heard her, I was watching virtually and I was like, that's Rick, I recognize his voice.
And I was surprised and I debated whether to bring up any of these budget issues, but I could tell the room wasn't ready to prepare for anything like that. And I was feeling I'd get a pushback and say, well, go to a budget meeting then, go to a budget committee. I'm thinking so I didn't want to kind of bring up what the issue is. So I just did, something that was totally irrelevant to libraries. So just a question out there. So, but not enough information. There was anything new. It was good for any new residents in town. It was a very good presentation for anybody within the last few years new to the city, but not old, but seasoned veterans.
I think it's important that the mayor does that, and I know that he did this to the Chamber of Commerce as well.
Yeah.
And so, there wasn't a huge crowd in here, but I think it's all people who don't go to chamber meetings wanting to hear it. It was definitely worth attending, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was good for the general audience.
Yeah. And he was very complimentary of all the work you've done, Marissa. I'm assuming you heard that.
Yes, I may or may not have had my phone listening and turned up the volume and shoved it in my husband's face. Just be like, listen, the mayor's saying my name.
Yes.
Yeah, this one.
Good. So nothing happened without that? Okay. Linnea?
I don't know, we had finals last week and I had the flu, so I wasn't there. I'm retaking them this week. But I think they went well. And then Philip, the children's librarian, had asked me to contact Miss Tamimi, the librarian at high school, and put up 3 slides of information, because throughout the hallways of the high school they just have TVs with an ongoing slideshow. And so there's now 3, one for the book club, the teen book club that's starting here, and one for some Nature Lab stuff, and one for the teen internship. And so she got those on today. And I think that's it. Oh, they had a book giveaway at lunch today, where like there's a charity and you could just go throughout like the commons area and just take books.
That's cool. Great, thanks. Anybody have any questions for Luann? Sorry, turning myself back on. Thanks, Luann. Marissa.
Okay, so I'll start off by just giving you a quick update about all of the budget stuff. So that mid-year budget review meeting with the budget committee, basically the whole portion of the presentation before the forecasting, which was at the very end, that was exactly what everyone should hear. That's what's going on in the city. The forecasting slides probably came out a little bit too early before the leadership team got to review them and try to figure out where we're really at. So we've had a couple budget meetings as a group to talk about what the shortfall really looks like, since we didn't really even know, and trying to figure out kind of areas where we could cut. After those meetings, I feel a little bit better about the library. We talked a lot about how what's really important is trimming the fat where it's possible, and I made it known that the library does not have any fat to trim, and that was received well, I think, by the team. So don't get me wrong, we're still gonna be trying to kind of cut and shave where we can. But just know that the leadership team, all the department heads, we're still working on everything else right now. Like, this is budget time right now. All of our final worksheets and whatnot, projections, all that, are actually due on Tuesday, a week from today. So once those are turned in, we'll have a more accurate picture of where we're at, and then I'll let you know, likely at the next lab meeting, where everything stands. I'm sure you guys have obviously heard about all of the federal stuff coming down about the cuts to libraries and IMLS and all of that. So I'm unsure of how that is going to directly affect us at the moment, but I have been receiving a lot of emails that I'm not feeling super great, but at the same time, it's really hard to say where things are gonna end up, just because this is likely the beginning of a really long fight. So if you guys did see the email I sent this morning, I forwarded you an email about what you can do, contacting your legislators, all of that. And while I know Oregon may not really be the biggest issue or problem, several of our representatives and legislators are Republicans, so maybe if they hear more from a lot of people who support libraries, maybe they'll be a little more open to supporting libraries. So I would urge you to reach out to as many people as possible, and tell people to contact their legislators. It doesn't just have to be ours. Contact their actual legislators. We want everybody to be hearing from all over the country about the people who need and support libraries, and want them to stick around. So that's all the information I have as far as that goes. As far as library updates, I gave you guys all a copy of the January, February bi-monthly report. I mean, really the main things of note there is that we had a lot more customer interactions, and I put customer interactions, it's really reference questions, things like that. A lot more in January, February. We got to the 3,000 mark, which I don't think we've ever gotten to that point. So we've been talking to a lot of people. I think there's been a lot of folks who've been worried about what's going on and what's coming down the line. So, I mean, it's good that they're wanting to help and support, but it does also show a huge need for libraries in general, just for, you know, random things and questions. If you turn to the back side, we've got some other things coming on. I told you that we were told that we were going to be getting a couple grants. 2 of the 3 have come in so far, and we're waiting to hear about some others. Don't forget about our Canby Community Reads program. There's a lot of stuff going on around Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, including the Canby Beer Library Trivia Night, which is going to be happening on the 9th of April. at the Canby Beer Library, and then also our virtual visit from Shelby Van Pelt herself on the 17th. So don't forget about that. Wanted to put some fun stuff in here too, some really positive stuff. Our Spice Club was one of two other libraries, Milwaukee and Westland, that was recognized on Oregon Live and The Oregonian, so that was really fun. Our participation in the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office monthly MSOU, which I had to put in there because nobody knows what it stands for, Mobile Stabilization Outreach Unit, which is really just, it's a place where people who have had issues, not violent issues or anything like that, but have had certain issues with the law, where we can connect them to resources so they can get help and kind of have a better jumping off point to go back into the working world. So we were recognized at the state level there. And then this was obviously before last week happened, but we've got some other upcoming events. Canby Civic Engagement Academy, that happened last week. I'm gonna go through my PowerPoint quickly so we can get to the funding PowerPoint, so I'll go over that. We're having a job/career fair on April 22nd from 10 to 2 in the library. We found out this year that the high school is going to be doing that every other year, so we're going to be doing the opposite year here. And I believe there's actually going to be some high school students being bused here for that as well, so they can actually be a part of it. Don't forget about / mark your calendars for May 1st, which is the first Thursday in May from 5 to 7. We're doing another library open house. So that'll be a really good time, and there's going to be a STEAM night that night from Todos Unitos, so there will be plenty of stuff to do. And then our summer reading program is about to start. Well, we're almost through the planning stages. It's going to start in June, on June 1st, but I did also want to tell you guys all, in case you didn't already know, every year there's a teen art contest link-wide, and for the first time ever, a Canby teen won. So we're actually going to be getting some shirts made with her art on it, and some stickers and all that other stuff. So it's really awesome. If you go to link.org, which I might as well just show you. If you go to link.org, it shows you the art and everything. Karen was on vacation when she found out someone from Canby won, so she was just really excited, and I told her while she was gone. But it has to go with the theme. The theme was Level Up at Your Library, which is the theme of summer reading this year. And there were a lot of really good pieces, but this was the one that won, not only because of the art, but because it connected back to the theme in a really specific, awesome way. So that was the winner for Link-wide, and you can actually, if you click on that link, oh my gosh, that's funny. It shows you all the art that was actually submitted for that art contest. And there was a lot of really, really cute stuff. But you know what? She won, and we're really excited. So anyway, her name is Lydia. We're hoping to do a social media post or something like that on the fact that she won. And like I said, we'll have some shirts made with that art on it. Something fun, really positive. Don't pay attention to that. Okay, because we'll get to it. Don't worry.
I got a question.
Okay.
When you,
Yes, that was the end of mine.
okay, this question actually for you, or maybe Paul. On this whole budget issue, and I didn't have a chance to see the 3-hour February 26th in total, but kind of scanned a little bit. And maybe correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is this was a mid-year, internal audit, not an outside audit or the official. So as far
So we did have an outside auditor for the previous year, and that had actually happened. I believe our finance director got the final report that morning.
okay,
And we did really well, as we usually do. And then, so that specific meeting was, so normally we have budget committee hearings in May, the month of May. There's usually 2 to 3, and that's where we go over everything we're gonna say that we're gonna be spending the following year. And so that meeting was just mid-year for this fiscal year review of where we're at. And then there was some forecasting slides that were added at the end, kind of last minute. that probably shouldn't have been, just because there was a lot of information in there that no one was certain about. The main reason that I'm still thinking about it and, in the back of my mind worried about it is because they were talking about the fact that there was gonna be a $3 million shortfall, and it doesn't mean deficit spending, it just means normally our council likes to have this amount of money in the pot and we're gonna be $3 million under it. So they were talking about widespread 10 to 15% materials and service cuts across the board in all the departments. But more than once, what was brought up was the general fund contribution to the library, which we are a teeny tiny little baby fraction of what is in the general fund, what comes out of the general fund. And so that really made me uneasy, and it's one of the reasons why we started having a bunch of meetings afterwards, was because no other departments were talked about, it was just the library's contribution from the general fund. So all that's to say is that that is still true. I don't think it's $3 million. I think that the department heads have been trying to figure out what that number really is, and we'll have a better picture next week after all the new worksheets are due, which we do a couple different worksheets. One is saying this is what we're gonna spend next year, and then we also do a worksheet where we're saying, based on what we said at the last budget meetings, this is what we actually think we're gonna spend this fiscal year at the end of June 30th. So.
That's what I was wondering, whether when you're talking about shortfall, you're trying to get ahead of it by making adjustments now for this budget year, and at the same time, like you say, you've got to work on a proposal for next budget year. Yeah. And how do you coordinate the two, and where are the cuts, if there is any cuts, where do they come from?
And that's what we're doing now, and that's what we should have been doing before any of that was even added.
I just want to get a handle on the process, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I think there was a lot said that night that may or may not have been accurate. I think really the main thing that I took away from it after I had time to talk with other people was that we don't know where we're at. That was based on numbers alone, right then and there, that's what the shortfall looked like. But after talking with other department directors about where we're actually at, I don't think it's that bad, but we still do have a shortfall, is kind of the gist.
I was.
Turn your mic on.
Oh, sorry. I'm still a little confused about, well, I took two things away. One, I'm confused about why this is a surprise, or how this happened. How did we not know this? And then, so that was my just lingering confusion. And then the other takeaway was I forgot, because now I'm distracted. I've lost it from my brain. What was my other takeaway? I don't know what it was. Anyways, I was a little taken aback by the meeting as well. And
Yeah.
I remember what it was. From my understanding of watching it, they were saying that if we do these 10 to 15% reductions now, we can sort of forestall the devastation. But even if we do it, it sounded to me like they were saying it was sort of like, if 26 is going to be bad, but even if we don't, 27 will be worse or something. Like, it didn't sound good to me. I watched it 3 times.
No, I've watched it several times
Okay.
too, and the biggest issue with that meeting was that there was just a lot said that should not have been said because information was not known at that time.
Yeah.
And the one thing that our finance director, Scott, was trying to communicate, but I think other things were kind of crowding it out, was the fact that in the general fund, there's already more than there was several years ago. We used to run on a certain reserve, and now we're like twice that now, I think. But it's under where our council would like to be. So I think right now, we're not in the best spot, but we're with everybody else in the state and honestly probably the country, all these cities. But at the same time, I think the point was that if we start really looking at our budgets now, figuring out numbers, cutting where we can, then we can kind of push off big cuts. Eventually, I would hope not even have to make them. But really what it comes down to it was that there was a lot said in that budget meeting, especially those last few slides, that really just needed to not be said until we actually knew where we were, like, literally at.
Yeah.
Yes. And based on the meetings I've had after that meeting, it's certainly not as dire as it was made out to be in that meeting. But also, like, some of what came out was also true. Like, we do need to be very careful. You have to understand, this city, as far as I'm concerned, is really careful with their budget. I know I'm very, very careful. I know other department directors are too. But at the same time, hearing that you're gonna have to make cuts when we're already hearing that there's gonna be federal cuts and all this other stuff happening, I'm thinking like transit right now, honestly. It could get bad. It absolutely could get bad. But the forecasting slides were really meant to tell everybody that yes, there is a problem. It could certainly get worse. Let's try to get a handle on it now. But we could also still be making cuts. I'm just hoping it's not gonna be big, and the one thing we've all talked about is we can't cut personnel right now. We're already like super, I like to say bare bones with the library staff. But I mean, you know, services cost money, and I don't think that the amount that we're bringing in for those services is really equal to what we're putting out right now. So that's where cuts end up coming into play.
This was also, typically, we wouldn't even have those conversations until May. So this was the first year where we actually like pushed for having a mid-year review to make these mistakes, have these questions 6 months ahead before we got into May, and now we're just seeing or really coming together and thinking about these. So, two, we have, as we know, there's been turnover, you know, et cetera. Scott's new, Eileen's new, et cetera. And so there's still that transition period of figuring how things were being done before, what are we doing now, et cetera. And when you have that kind of turnover, like lack of, you know, consistency, sometimes there can be mistakes made as well. So there was kind of like a little bit of a perfect storm with that. There was a couple of mistakes made, trying to figure things out. It's the first time doing this media review, so going through that process was new. And so I think overall, having information is more positive, you know, than the scare of what happened, you know, from that meeting. And I think we're now looking at and addressing and taking, you know, looking at those things now instead of in May. And so that's positive. And so, like Marissa said, kind of the numbers and some of the mistakes, some of the way it looked like there could be a bigger cliff than there really is. But one, you know, a lot of the funding for the city comes from development as well. So development is really slow. We're not building as many houses, we're not getting as many SCCs and those fees from developers, and so that impacts the budget as well. So as that is slowing down, you're looking at, okay, if this is slowing down now, if that continues to slow down, budgets next year are going to be tighter. So now we're looking at those things now and trying to forecast and make sure that, you know, we're getting ahead of the game for next year. If the economy turns around by next year, that would change and we could be doing a lot better. But, you know, it's looking at all those factors now, and again, 6 months earlier instead of waiting until a month or two before the new budget here. So that's kind of a little bit of high level of how that went.
It always worries me to hear that though, because I feel like every year since I've been here, you know, we do eventually get that general fund contribution, but it is like we have to fight for it every year. And, you know, if certain things are gonna be on the chopping block, that's just something that we all need to make sure we're talking about and we're aware of, because I don't know as far as like importance, you know, where the library's really at. I mean, at this point, I know like, you know, police, very important, and other departments, very, very important. Library services, I think, are super, super important, but I know there are some people that, you know, would put other things over the library. So it's just something that we all need to continue talking about, and we also need to understand that there's going to be less and less support federally, and in some other areas. So it's just something we really need to talk about and keep in the back of everyone's minds. So at this point, yes, there's a budget shortfall. I don't think it's as bad as it was made to seem, but there is a budget shortfall still. So that's kind of the main point with that. And when you're already having funding issues, like, that is the last thing you want to hear. That meeting was very stressful.
Okay, but since we don't know the answers, I would like to move on. Just because we're just sitting talking about something that we don't know what exists, you know? So, and we have a bunch of stuff to get through tonight. So for the Friends report, the Friends recently lost one of their longtime volunteers, Patty Bussey. She died after a long illness. Marissa mentioned that the summer reading program starts June 1st. The Friends have always had a big book sale associated with the summer reading program. That's going to be Saturday, June 14th this year. It's usually out either outside or in the lobby area. It's the biggest book sale of the year for the Friends. And then, you know, Marissa talked about these, the Candy Reads program. I just wanted to emphasize, this is paid for by the Friends of the Library. You know, that there wouldn't be, none of this stuff would exist without the Friends of the Library. So,
There would not be programs without the Friends of the Library.
yeah. And if you haven't read the book, it is an awesome, awesome book. So, and then also, in terms of other programs that, there's a seed saving program this Saturday. You know, Maud has done a phenomenal job with the whole seed library and stuff like that. So any way you can do this, we're getting close to gardening season, people, you know. And it's not only a place to go get seeds, but let's say I buy a packet of green bean seeds and I only use 6 or 8 of them. I can donate the rest of them to the seed library, and then somebody uses them, they don't sit in my pantry and go stale for the next year, you know. So it's just a way of being community minded. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and I forgot to put this on there, March is Women's History Month, and since in the bookstore I own the history section, there is a big display out in there for Women's History Month. Okay, so Marissa, is there any questions about Friends? Marissa, which one are you gonna do first?
I think I'm only gonna have time to do one, and I would rather do the library funding issues.
Okay.
I can save the Civic Engagement Academy one for the next time we meet or
Okay.
any time, honestly. Because I do anticipate questions right now, so just prepare yourselves. Okay. All right, here we go.
Before you start, I have gotten feedback from people that we are really bad about turning off our mics. I'm the worst. And we rustle papers and things like that. And it's very annoying to people who are listening to this later. So I'm trying to be very good about turning off my mic. And if everybody else would pay attention to that and make sure that if you want to speak, you turn it on so it's recorded. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, here we go. All right. Why we're here, I'm gonna talk about library district funding issues, just our library funding issues, changes to grant funding, our City of Canby budget shortfall, which I'm not gonna talk about a lot, but, and then effects of cutting service levels for this community. So, current problems versus future problems. We've got a few. So long-term sufficiency and sustainability of the library funding. I'm going to review a couple things as far as this goes, but we really need to review the current tax rate. It's not enough right now. We need to review the district formula, the way that everything is set up. And then we need to really be thinking about some of the equity issues involved. And let me also say really quick that if you have any questions, or by the time we get to the end of this, you're like, well, you didn't talk about this, please let me know. This is a draft. Okay, City contributions, it's always a fight. We already talked about the general fund. Rising costs, we obviously have both physical and digital demand now, which is very, very tricky to deal with the same amount of budget money. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, but digital anything is way more expensive than physical, and you also don't get to keep it forever like you do physical. So that's a different problem that's also part of this issue. We have an increase in item prices, shipping and handling charges, supplies and services, and internal charges. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Our library collection budget, which is really what we pay for all the stuff you see in there, has not changed since 2018, 2019, despite those rising costs and circulation statistics. That is something that I think is really tricky, especially when demand is continuing to go up. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Service standards, basically right now they're still remaining the same despite increased visits and statistics. I'll talk about something called OLA, so Oregon Library Association Service Standards, in a little bit, which talks about staffing. It says, if you have this many people in your service area, this is how many staff you should have. If you have this big of a space, this is how many items you should have in it, and I'll show you where we're at with that. Staffing and burnout's probably one of the biggest ones right now. I've got 7.88 FTE, so that's full-time equivalent. If you include on-calls, that's 8.9. And we obviously had more than that, but we did lose our bilingual librarian position in 2019 and 4 library page positions, which were one of the main reasons why we were able to stay open until 8 o'clock back then. Circulation duties, right now there's longer waits for everything, just because all of those duties that normally library pages would be doing have been absorbed by every other staff member, and we're already overworked and burned out, so that's been really tricky. I think hours will always be a part of the conversation. We're closed Sundays, we're not open till 8 anymore, but that's all we can do right now, the way that things are. Current service levels, there's no way that they are going to be sustainable the way that they are, so that's something that we're taking a look at as a staff group. And then I'll talk a little bit about this later as well, but the Karis area, this is a really big issue. If you know anything about the Karis area, it falls under the Canby School District boundaries and our Canby Fire District boundaries, but it is not a part of the Library Service District boundaries, so all of the money and funding that that area would normally be giving to us is actually going to Oregon City. I'll talk a little bit about how complicated that makes things. So, let me try to do this. Okay. Okay. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to show you really quick just some information about the library districts in Oregon. We are one of the lowest tax rates as far as library districts go in Oregon. All of the yellow highlight you see, that's everybody who has basically a higher tax rate than we do. And we're in the orange there with 39 cents on the dollar for about every $1,000 of assessed value, property value. And I did want to go ahead and highlight Multnomah County there because I know if you guys know anything about Multnomah County, they do have a lot more. They have, they're fine-free, they do auto renewals, there's a lot of other stuff. They have a much bigger pot for their digital materials. And you can see $1.24 times 21,730 people, that's a lot more funding than we have. And so that's something that we're always kind of competing with is, all the folks saying, why aren't you fine-free? Why are you still charging me? And it's because people here are paying the lowest tax rate, if you compare the two. But we're paying one of the lowest tax rates in Oregon, and that's a really big deal, which is why we're talking about a new library district, a new tax district with a higher rate, but there's a lot that goes into this conversation, so I'll try to get through some of it. So just in case you don't already know, the way that the library district funding works is this. So it's a permanent tax rate, which means it does not go up and we don't have to keep going out for a vote every so often. It's a permanent tax rate of 39 cents per $1,000 of assessed property value. That rate was established in 2008. And it wasn't enough then, but it was what the people who were working in Link at the time thought would pass, and it did, thankfully. So if it wasn't enough then, you can only imagine how little it is now. But we're doing the best, the best we can with what we have. And I'm very proud of us for doing that. Pat on the back. The library receives funds from the residents of their service areas. So like I said earlier, we do not have the Karis area right now, even though a lot of those patrons actually come into our library because it's closer. Funds are distributed to library cities per a formula defined in the IGA. This is one area that we really want to try to work on because the way that the formula is set up, it is not equitable at all. If you already know, for example, property value in Lake Oswego that's the most expensive city to live in Oregon. So it is much higher there than other cities, including Clackamas County cities. And so they're getting a lot of funding while other libraries are really struggling to provide the same services. And they're one of the libraries who's able to provide their patrons with a lot of extra resources as well. And so when you have that going on, it makes it even more unequitable because then a lot of people who would normally even come here are now changing their home libraries to that home library to get those extra services, which then takes away from us. So it's very complicated and something we want to work on. But something that is in the intergovernmental agreement or the IGA, it says this: district funds may not be used to support general overhead or administrative costs of cities except to the extent such overhead or administrative costs are directly related to the provision of library service or operation of a public library. So that really means no capital project should be coming from that pot of money. And things like allocated costs or internal costs should come from the general fund. And I'll tell you a little bit about how much we're paying for those things and how that's kind of impacted us as well. Purpose of district funds is to provide a dedicated, stable funding source for the support of library services. That funding was not meant to pay for everything to run all of these libraries, but there are a lot of cities who have interpreted it that way. So some cities don't get any contributions from their city's general fund, and others get some and others get even more than that. So it's very inequitable right now. And then part of the reason that this district was formed too was in order to provide money and funding so all the different cities could have a library where they could then raise the service levels at all those facilities to meet the basic thresholds recommended by the Oregon Library Association. And I'll get into those in a minute. So yeah, last one's not really important. Oh my goodness. I clicked that one time and it went to like the end of my slides. Hold on. Okay. All right, this is for fiscal year 23-24, which ended June 30th of this past year. So remember, our fiscal year is July 1st to June 30th of the following year. So I wanted to only look at the libraries in Clackamas County. And I wanted to show you how much we're all getting from the district, the library district, what other cities are getting, what other libraries are getting from their cities and their general funds, and then really ranking where we're at here. So Lake Oswego, for example, they're a terrible example to use, but love the library, love the staff there. They get about $3,650,000 from the library district, and their city actually kicks in even more than that. So that's why they're able to provide some extra services. And really, that's one of the reasons why, if you ever look on the catalog, they buy like 30 of a book. We buy like 2. Just because they have a very large service area and they do help a lot of people and their property value is more expensive. So all that stuff is included here. I'm not going to go over all of these, but I did want you to see Canby Public Library. There we are. We get a little over $1 million from the library district, which does pay, a huge chunk of our operating costs here. And then our city usually kicks in. That's actually the highest number it's been, $375,000. I think it ended up being a little bit lower at the end. And then this year, I believe it's $325,000. I'm really trying to save the city some money. But you can see on that last column on the right, Lake Oswego, they have the most revenue, funding, all that good stuff. Estacada has the least. They are one of 3 libraries, I think, that don't get any contribution from their city or general fund. And Canby is just kind of hanging out towards the bottom, but not at the bottom. So, and I'll send you these slides if you want to look at anything in depth, but I'm going to go through this fairly quickly so we can get through it all. This was a slide that I shared at the Civic Engagement Academy, Christy. Yeah, this was probably, once I got to this slide, I think I spent a half an hour answering questions.
Yeah, people's minds were blown, like,
I mean, that's why I share these things. So, for example, Chris and Hannah's The Women, very popular book. It's still super popular. If we buy a hardcover copy of that book, it costs $18. We buy a large print copy, it's $41. We buy an audiobook, it's $60. For all of our hardcover books, we also pay for library Mylar jackets to be put on. It takes a long time, which is why we pay our book vendor to do it. And then we also get some property stamps, things that say the library and have our address on it. And so I put here, hardcover, we have 7 copies of that book, or at least we did at one point. Large print, we had 3. Audiobooks, we had 1. And then if you do, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 times the library Mylar jackets and the property stamps, you can see how much it costs to buy items here. And then I know it's kind of being blocked by the sharing thing, but an ebook, for example, is also very expensive. It's about $60 for one 24-month, so 2-year license. It's not like we buy an audiobook and then as many people as we have that have it on hold can check it out all at the same time. That is not how it is. It is one at a time unless you buy more than 1 license, and the license does expire. So I put 151 in parentheses there because that's how many copies are in link and available, digital copies. And there's about 110 e-audiobook copies as well. Obviously, Canby is not paying for all of that, and it is also based on checkout statistics and service areas and all of that stuff. But you can see how just one book is incredibly expensive to have on the shelves when we are trying to follow certain reports to make sure we have the right amount of things. And something that I did mention too at the Civic Engagement Academy presentation was that we purchase a lot of books based on something called a PAR report, purchase alert report. So every 5 Canby specific holds, we have to have 1 copy, 1 holdable copy. So we had 7 copies of The Women at one point, just the hardcover, which means we had at least 35 people had put it on hold. If you see Lucky Day copies, that's not included. It has to be holdable copies. Lucky Day copies are extra on top of what we have to buy. So you can't actually have a Lucky Day copy unless you have a holdable copy.
So I put a hold on Beautiful Ugly recently. Unfortunately, a friend gave it to me. There were 139 holds on it.
Yeah. And I can always show you from our reports how many are Canby holds. But if you see Lake Oswego has 30 copies, that's because they had 30 times 5. That's how many holds they had at one point. And last fiscal year, we added a little over 7,000 items. So you can see how those costs really do add up and add up quickly. And normally we're hovering around 6,000 items that we add a year, but last year we did get a lot of donations that we were able to add. So that was really cool. I'm gonna fly through this really. So materials and services, I wanted to show you just how much some things cost. So e-content, I did fiscal year 18-19 because I wanted to show you pre-COVID, and then I did last fiscal year, so that's the most current, and then what we're budgeting and proposing. So e-content, for example, before COVID, it was about $17,000 a year. We had 25,000 checkouts. Last fiscal year, we paid only about $1,000 extra, which was great, and we had 45,000 checkouts. This coming year, so starting July 1st, our e-content contribution is going to be about $23,000. So everything is jumping up, and it's jumping up quickly. I'm not going to go through some of this other stuff since I don't think we have time, but travel and training is really important, but I'm trying to keep it as low as I possibly can so we can still get staff what they need as far as travel and training goes. Supplies and services, for pre-COVID, we paid about $10,000. This year, we're also at about $10,000, but we budgeted about $19,000, and that's partially because we have some grant funding in there. And next fiscal year, I'm proposing a small cut, just so I can contribute to the cuts that we have to make. But this is really difficult to cut anywhere, and so I'm hoping that, you know, what I'm budgeting for will be enough. It should be, but we have to make hard decisions sometimes. That's what it comes down to. So library collection, pre-COVID, we spent about $87,000. We bought about 8,000 items that year, also a lot of donations, by the way. And we had 257,000 checkouts. Last fiscal year, we had 7,000 items, 237,000 checkouts. And that's partially because of the digital content and the increase there. And so basically I'm budgeting next fiscal year the same amount, $90,000. It's one of the easiest areas to cut for library staff, but it's one of the most difficult to cut for patrons. Volunteers, I'm not gonna get into that. And then, oh my gosh, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can show you this last, this last column here. So, oh my gosh. For some reason, it won't let me actually scroll, so I'm gonna do this. Internal charges, I wanted to show you pre-COVID facilities charges, so that's custodial, that's building problems, all that. $56,000. This current fiscal year, $115,000. So I want you to see how big those jumps are and how much that is going to impact us, and is impacting us. And then same with tech services, and this is just for city equipment. This is not the patron computers that we have. It's not our check-in computers. It's not our public service desk computers. This is just our staff computers and phones and whatnot. Tech services went from 36,000, now it's going to 52,000. To be fair, there's a whole lot of technology that has to be replaced right now, and library staff were one of the first to get replacements since our stuff had been in this building since before we even got into this building. So we did get all of that replaced recently. So yeah, yes. I'm gonna try to go back to this, but I also would like to keep sharing my screen for anyone at home watching. Okay, I'm not even gonna care about this. Okay, gosh, I'm sorry I'm zipping through this. Next meeting, I can spend as much time as we want here too. So just really quickly, I'm gonna show you what the OLA standards are and where we are at. We have a population of just over 25,000 people right now. That is our population. That is not our actual library service area, which is more than that. But the OLA standard that says that we need to have 0.35 FTE per 1,000 people served, we're good there, basically. We have about 8.91 FTE with on-calls. Director has MLS, I do have my MLS, and a fifth of staff have their MLS. Actually, half of our staff have their MLS, so that's really great. Masters in Library Science, by the way. Materials, we should have somewhere around, it's about 50,000, and we have about 55,000, so that's great. We would add more if we had space, but we don't. And then access, as far as our population served service area, we should be open 50 hours. We are open at exactly 50 hours. Could not do any more than that, the way that things are. So really quickly, ranking for open hours, most to least, Happy Valley is open the most at 62 hours a week. Sandy Hoodlin is kind of close to the bottom there, since they're one of two branches, if you will. Ranking for staff, most to least FTE, Lake Oswego has the most at 33.7, Gladstone has the least at 4.57, and then ranking for total revenue, most to least, you got Lake Oswego at the top, Estacade at the bottom, and Canby is just still hovering in that same area, not the bottom, not the middle, but somewhere in the middle of that. Okay, so I recently had to do this in asking for page positions to be added back, we'll see. So I wanted to basically have staff start tracking how much time they're spending doing circulation duties. So that's library page duties and the FTE equivalent. Circulation hours completed by volunteers, so that's shelving, things like that, things that they can't actually do. 0.35 FTE is what it ends up equaling out to, about 14.19 hours a week. Pick list is about 16 hours a week, 0.4 FTE is that equivalent. And then circulation hours completed by staff so far this fiscal year is about 36 hours a week, 0.92 FTE. So that's a person and a half just with those duties alone. So I thought that was kind of interesting to show. And then I'm gonna really briefly, so I can at least save a couple minutes for questions, talk about the Karis area. So here is Canby, this is where we are. Here's Oregon City, that's where they are. Karis area is right here. We've got a lot of, and it kind of hovers over here in this area. So all of this funding is going to their library, even though they're part of our fire district and our school district. That's some other maps on here too. This is the Karis area school attendance zone map. Obviously it overlaps with Canby. It overlaps a little bit with Oregon City too, but mostly with Canby. And then I just wanted to show you, this is the map of the service areas. So Molalla and Estacada look like they have a huge service area, and it's a huge area, but they don't have as many patrons as some of the more densely packed cities do. You've got Oregon City, Sandy, Hoodland, whatnot. And then you've got some of these teeny tiny little baby libraries that have the most funding, which is fun. So just a summary of all of the issues. We've got some long-term sufficiency and sustainability of library funding issues. City contributions remain low, and it's always a fight. You know, we're always grateful to get what we get, but we need it, and I don't want to have to fight for them all the time. It's exhausting. Rising costs for physical and digital materials and everything else associated with that. Library collection budget has stayed the same. Our service standards are becoming harder to meet. Staffing and burnout is a real issue right now. Circulation duties being absorbed up by all the staff and having no pages has been hurting us big time. I think our open hours don't meet our community's needs as well as they could if we had more funding. And then of course the Karis area I think is going to be a big issue and something that we definitely want to fix in the next library district if we are able to go out for a vote for that. So do you guys, I zipped through that really fast, but do you have any questions, concerns, or anything that you think would be helpful to add? And I will include this at the beginning, I think, of our next meeting too, where we can kind of go through it a little bit again and talk more about it. But there's a lot of issues here. These are just the ones that I think are the biggest concern right now. There's other ones as well, but I think these are the ones that people really need to understand and be aware of since it's what we're fighting right now.
I just think, and I think that you mentioned it in one of the slides, but another area of concern and like not meeting the community's needs is not having the bilingual staff. Like that's huge.
It is huge, and we are trying to figure out all the things that we can do right now. Like for example, Bridging Cultures, they have an ESL class where they don't just teach the language, but they kind of get together and learn things. They're coming in April here, and we're basically gonna have somebody there translating so we can tell them about all the services that we provide. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge chunk of our population that we can't serve, period, and it's a really big deal, and I have no idea what to do about it right now with the way things are.
Yeah, and I definitely, that's not your fault, you're not doing, but I just, yeah, absolutely.
So what is the distribution formula in the IGA? Is it done by, I mean, I'm asking how it is calculated.
Let me see if I can look it up quickly. It's interesting. It also just looks like a bunch of numbers, but I'll show you.
Oh, yeah, I know. But
I'm gonna try to show you because there's a perfect page with it on there.
So I would also suggest, Marissa, that you send these out and people have a chance to look at them and come back with questions. I'm not a Johnny on the spot with questions. I need something to percolate a little bit before I come back with questions.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I'll send the slides out and you guys can definitely tell me what questions you have, and I'll make sure I bring them up. Okay, I'm gonna share with nobody here. My gosh. Wow, this keyboard. Oh my gosh.
No.
I know, I'm typing it out and it's. Let's see if I can. I don't know. Oh my gosh, it actually came up. Hold on.
Thank you.
Okay, here is the formula. So total county assessed value, and then we've got some other fun numbers here. Then you've got the participating cities, and it does like a, a whole number
Yes.
here. So you can obviously see that.
I can also see the percentage.
Yes. Then it talks about, there's also an unincorporated population that's included here as well. That's a part of the formula. And then you go all the way down here to the rest of these numbers, and that's it. You understand? So anyway, the point of this is that this sort of worked at the time. It certainly doesn't work now. And when you think about the cities that are already willing to contribute funds, and then the cities that are not, and the formula doesn't change for that, that is something that we really want to talk about and try to work through.
Yeah, the piece of what I'm actually asking is, how do they know how many people are being served? I mean, I'm with reference to Karis, to that area. Is it because the people in Karis have library cards that they got at Oregon City?
No,
Is this because
It was
Oregon
originally
City
a
said-
part of the 2008 library district. I've heard different stories from different people, but apparently at the time, Oregon City, like it had something to do with the schools or something. Like we had so many schools in our area and Oregon City didn't or something, so they were trying to make that more equitable. And I've been told this by a couple of people, that was supposed to be corrected even in this district, and it did never get corrected. Obviously, because money is involved in.
Well, yes, I think it's unlikely that Oregon City is suddenly going to become generous. However, there has to be a way there has to be something that's less nebulous as a way of counting who uses the facilities.
And part of the reason why LDAC is fighting is because a lot of those members, not Amy, a lot of those members want to fix these issues in the current library district. For what? To pass different, like the same amount of money around? No, let's fix it in a new district so we're not all fighting for that money. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't think we're gonna be able to fix it right now, the way that things are.
Is there any way that you or us can come up with some suggestions in two scenarios? One, if we go to a new district, do we push our efforts in that direction? Or do we push them more towards what can we do within the current formulas and distributions and whatever that will not, where we don't need a new district? Can we get any movement that way? It's kind of like, can we amend something within the formula without going to a new district?
No, that LDAC has been fighting about that for like 6+ years, is to make these changes in the current district, and it's not happening. All the library directors want people to throw their time and energy into setting up a new district and correcting these issues.
Okay.
Because we all, like, for the most part, we all need more money, we all need more funding. And the reason that there is now gonna be a library district task force is because LDAC is literally having that fight round and round over again. And so now there's another task force that is being created to look at some of these issues. And basically, in the LINC, the Libraries in Clackamas County Tactical Plan, all of the directors, we are all currently researching and working on with different committees in the county what a new district could look like what different rates would do for all of our libraries, what we could do with more budget and more funding as far as services go, how we can make that whole thing equitable. I don't think we're gonna solve any issue, period, in this current library district.
Okay. And then you have the political element, and city councils and mayors and city administrators, and then the turnover in there, and 4 years from now, I think you can have a whole different, we've seen it here. A lot of turnover in the last 10 years.
And that's one of the reasons why we all need to be talking about libraries and funding issues, because it needs to be at the forefront of all of those people's minds. Yes, this is important, but like we have been struggling forever. And if you consider other departments and other facilities and buildings, we are open the most. The library is open the most, even not being open on Sundays. And so if all of these people are hearing how much the library is used and how much they support the community, maybe they will understand and put their own time and energy into helping us form a new district to get more money.
Okay, so my suggestion is, Marissa, you send out these slides, we take the slides, and we come up with questions, thoughts, observations, and we bring this back to the next meeting, because we could spend all evening here, and it's.
Yeah, I'll send you an email with these slides, and I'll also remind you to come up with questions, thoughts,
Right.
concerns, all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we can talk about all of that. And if you have any suggestions as to what to add to or anything that you think that I should definitely explain, please put that in there, even if you think.
Yeah, I was wondering if everybody here understood the overhead issues. I mean, I worked in a corporation, I always had my big fair share of overhead to deal with on my budget, and I just, maybe a little bit of explanation on that, okay? Okay, sound like a plan, so we have the civic engagement presentation next time, we have, this is probably the most important thing, and then the duties and, you know, stuff like that, and people could, you know, to me that's important, but it's not nearly as important as the budget issues, so in terms of priorities, this would be a higher priority. Okay? Is that okay with everybody? Okay, can I call this meeting to an end? Everybody okay?
Adjourned.
We are duly adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming.